Why is Java such trash for programming? Well, it's actually quite simple. It's because of these three things. And by the way, this does not apply if you are a complete beginner or if you just want to make Android apps. But if you want to become really good at programming, then these three things will make you quit Java and probably cry a little bit. Number one, everything is an object. This may sound like a good idea, but it's actually a terrible one. Let me explain. In Java, everything is an object, which means that even primitive data types like integers and strings are actually objects. And that's fine. You can do that if you want to. But the problem arises when you start dealing with more complex data types like arrays and lists. In Java, these are all objects as well, which means that you have to treat them like objects. You have to create methods to access their data, and you have to use the dot notation to access their members. This makes your code look like this. Yeah, it looks horrible. And it also makes your code very verbose and difficult to read. And that's just for basic functionality. If you want to do something more complex like sorting an array or modifying a list, you have to write even more code. And that's where things get really ugly. You have to write so much code just to do something simple. It's like using a hammer to screw in a light bulb. It's just not efficient. And that's what happens in most programming languages. You don't have to do this in C# or C. You can access the data members and methods directly without having to create another object. That makes your code cleaner and easier to read. Number two, generics. Generics were introduced to Java to allow for the creation of generic classes and methods. This means that you can write code that works with any type, not just a specific type. Sounds great, right? Well, it's actually a terrible idea. The problem with generics is that they make your code very verbose and difficult to read. Let me show you an example. Here we have a method that takes a list and returns the first element of that list. Simple enough, right? Well, let's say that we want to return the first element of a list that is of type integer. So we can do that by specifying the type parameter e_extends_integer. This makes the method only return the first element of an integer list. But now our code is harder to read and understand. And that's the problem with generics. They make your code very flexible, but at the expense of readability and simplicity. With generics, you always have to specify the type parameter, even if it's obvious what the type should be. For example, if you're creating a list, you always have to specify the type, even if it's clear from the context what the type should be. This makes your code very repetitive and boring. And finally, number three, lambdas. Lambdas were introduced to Java to allow for the creation of anonymous inner classes. This makes it possible to create a class inside of another class without giving it a name. Sounds great, right? Well, it's actually a terrible idea. The problem with lambdas is that they make your code very confusing and hard to debug. Let me show you an example. Here we have a lambda expression that takes two integers and returns their sum. Now, if you want to debug this code, you have no idea where to start. The entire function is just a single line of code, and it's very hard to figure out what's going on. Plus, you have no way of knowing what the function does just by looking at it. You have to actually execute the code and test it out to see what it does. And that's the problem with lambdas. They make your code very concise, but at the expense of clarity and maintainability. So yeah, there are many more reasons why Java is bad, but these are the main ones. And if you want to learn more about those, just search Google. Anyway, thanks for watching.